There she is. I hope she gets paid every time she says that. She'll be worth $1 million. Good morning, everybody, and welcome to this webinar, the third in a series of quick webinars that we put together called Refresh, which was just about people having more or less had a couple of years for various reasons, unable to do work outdoors. And we asked through one of our surveys people to say what they would like a little reminder of. And last week we were looking at accessibility, and this week we're looking at some issues around making your work greener. Hopefully this will apply to both companies touring with outdoor work and to festivals and venues receiving outdoor work. I just emphasize that this is by no means in a quick hour-long Thursday morning webinar intended to be the definitive guide to how to make your festival as environmentally sensitive as possible. This is just a quick reminder of things from 3 guests who we've asked to speak with us today because of their experience and their work. So we have Tom from the Handlebards, which is a touring company, famously who tour on bicycles. Tom will tell us a bit more about that. We have Chris from Shambala Festival, who'll be talking about how he works from a festival point of view, and is also a founder of the Association of Independent Festivals, I think. And then we have Sarah from Highly Sprung, a established outdoor arts company, whose work, as much as anything, includes environmental themes as well as environmental practice and how we put that together. Great. So I'm going to, first of all, if I may, call upon Tom to talk to us. Tom, I wonder if you could start with telling us a little bit about the Handlebards and about your USP of being on bicycles.
Sure. We are a cycling theatre company, as you said. We have been around for 9 years. The general concept of what we do is that we cycle from venue to venue all across the UK, performing Shakespeare and outdoors, or in theatres too. So our venues will vary from sort of National Trust properties, council sort of parks, theatres, schools, bicycle yards, kind of anywhere that we can pop up and perform, we'll go there. For the years leading up until COVID, we would cycle with a trailer on the back of our bike, and we would carry all of our set props and costumes in those trailers. And then post-COVID, we wanted to find, well, during COVID, when we wanted to still tour, we wanted to find a way that we could still perform, but keep distance between our actors and audience. So we created a wooden stage, which we couldn't cycle everywhere. But instead, we then had an electric van join the cycling troupe and carry that stage. So we've now kind of, it's almost like Handlebards 2.0 in that we have the actors cycling as a peloton and an electric van following them with the stage in tow. And that's us, and that's what we do. And we've been doing that for 9 years.
How the hell, just this is completely, you put a tour together that is cyclable? It's amazing that you do, and I think it's really interesting.
It's, you know, it's quite interesting. And I think it's a practice that if other touring companies tried, it would be achievable, and it would help even if you're not cycling, you're reducing the amount of fuel you're going to use, which is both good environmentally and for your pocket. And part of that is just about kind of being firm with venues. You know, people will say, oh, we can't have Wednesday because Wednesday is X, or we can't have that. And you kind of have to say, look, it's Wednesday, or we're going to be in the Northwest by Thursday. So that's the day we have to cycle, excuse me, we cycle a max of 40, but mainly 30 miles a day. So each show has to be within a 30-mile radius, which is interesting as well, because a lot of theatres have this sort of 30-mile, 40-mile exclusion zone. And so we kind of have to say, we can't do that. That's not possible. We will be performing between, 20 and 40 miles away from here tomorrow, and there's nothing you can do about that. And you'd be surprised how flexible people can and will be when you have that reason, when you're like, there's only so far we can cycle. People are willing to be flexible. And so, and if we have to, we will put if there's a huge distance, we'll put the actors on a train. I'm not that cruel. And, I think it upsets me when people then go, oh, that's cheating. And I'm kind of like, by whose standards? They've cycled 1,500 miles across the UK. What more do you want from them? And I think that's an interesting thing as well, is that idea that people get of, if you hold yourself to this standard, then you have to be a complete purist, and anything less than that isn't good enough. And I don't think that's right. And I think festivals and companies should always strive to be as sustainable as possible. But there has to be a boundary, and that boundary is people's well-being and the well-being of your company, and to not wear them or yourself out because of you trying so hard to be so sustainable. I do think that I think sustainability and well-being really do come together, and there has to be a balance.
I think post-COVID, a lot of us are talking more about well-being, which is no bad thing at all in our work. I mean, it's so obvious that you have this big thing that you do that is absolutely there in your name as a company, and I mean, yeah, I don't think it's cheating as well to go on the train once in a while. I often cycle to Brighton and then get the train back. So I even cycled down for a meeting. I want to cycle down for a job interview in Brighton. Didn't get the job. They were completely unimpressed. I said, I've just cycled here. They went, yes, anyway, first question.
Oh, no.
Didn't want that job. So I don't think it's cheating at all. But what else do you do? We want more.
Yeah, okay. I mean, I guess what that has spurred on in us is trying to make sure that sort of sustainability is at the heart of any decision making. I think you've got to say that it's as important as the sort of financial bottom line is are we doing this in a way that is the most sustainable we can. And you know, a lot of that advice we've taken over the years from Julie's Bicycle, for instance. Their recommended printer, Seacourt, are a circular printing company, so they're brilliant, and we've worked with them for the last few years. When we've had to use trains, or when in the past we've used vans or things, we use a company called Ecolibrium, who are really good for festivals and touring companies and help calibrate your carbon footprint and then tell you how much you should donate. And they donate it to gold accredited. Getting a heart there from Chris for giving you. Oh, because of course you're the CEO of Ecolibrium. That's great. So yeah, I mean, we do things like that. But I think what's important is really boiling it down to it just being a part of everything that you say and everything that you do. So, you know, our actors at the start of the show will be like, we've cycled X amount of miles today. And we're not doing that to kind of go, and you should have too. It's just about making sustainable choices and a sustainable mindset just a part of your everyday, and a part of that, and make people go, oh God, that's really interesting. Like, I wonder why they did that. And for people to do their own research. And you'll find that by doing this, just opportunities and partnerships and collaborations rise because of your general open mindset to being sort of as green as possible. And we're working currently with an organization in Sheffield called Studio Polpo, who are an architect, social enterprise architecture company. And for the last few years, COVID getting in the way, but we've been trying to work with them to build a sort of a community theatre space made from living trees. And this is new sort of architectural practice of working with living sort of structures, but that came just from us being sort of having sustainability just and talking about it and it being in our mind all the time. It is really strange how when you just do that, these opportunities arise and people go, oh, I've heard that you do this, therefore would you be interested in doing that? So sometimes it isn't just about, it's, you know, the Seacourts and the Ecolibrium, and that is important, but I think sometimes it is those gentle nudges in all of your work are really quite key, I would say, in terms of engaging your audiences and creating interesting partnerships.
When you talk about that, I'm remembering that hilarious conference we were at about environmental theatre, which was a bit nuts, well-meaning, yes. but not very practical, some of the ideas. All theatres should be grown from scratch, I seem to remember, was basically the thing, which was fine. Working as a company, everybody has to obviously buy in. And how do you communicate what you're trying to do with your company? You're quite small, obviously, but you have multiple tours going out sometimes.
Yes. I think it starts with even the audition process of letting people know why we do what we do, you know, why we cycle. I think sometimes an actor or company manager can be like, that's cool, but it's like, okay, yeah, but the reason we do it is this, and it's about sustainability, and it's about trying to be as environmentally sustainable as possible. And I think it's just about that sort of gentle sort of educating of your company, and for them to then get it through osmosis. But that's particularly important to us because our actors tend to be the ones who are getting radio interviews or things like that. And I mean, for instance, even they were on, I think it was one of our first TV slots the other week. We had BBC South, and one of the actors wanted to talk about the company, and they said, look, you've got one sentence to talk about the company. And she managed to get in. Handlebards have cycled for 9 years because they really care about the environment, and that was it, and that was gone. But she knew that was going to be the most important message to sell about us. She could have said anything, you know, it was for friends, it was about adventure, XYZ. And I think just that, making sure, again, the people, that your actors, everyone know it's just at the heart of what you do, then she knew that one soundbite was all we needed. And so, yeah, I think it's just about it being in the general zeitgeist of your chat with the company. And even
I think it's also important to say, Tom, that the shows contain cycling as well. It's not that you arrive there, park the bikes. Is actually cycling becomes a theme of your interpretation of Shakespeare. So it's actually, it's embedded beyond just this, what could simply be a virtue signaling gimmick, which it's not. It's part of your narrative there. Yeah, absolutely. We work with a company called Electric Pedals, and they who are a London-based sort of bicycle company who make sort of convert bicycle energy into electricity. And over the years, they've created those various sets which are bicycle powered. So the bike will create electricity, which will turn set pieces and things like that. Or then, yes, which perhaps it is a bit more gimmicky with some of the stuff we do, you know, bicycle pumps as swords and wheels as shields and things like that, just to kind of had a sort of, it's to make it funny as well. I suppose that's the other thing, is sustainability needn't be dry, and it needn't be boring, and it needn't be doom and gloom. Like, it can be fun. Like we try and show that when we're cycling across the country, we're having a fun time. Are there bad days? Of course. Like, sometimes it's terrible cycling down horrible A roads or in the rain, but there's also a lot of joy that comes from it as well. And I think that's what we try and do, is we're putting the cycling in the show, we're making people laugh, we're showing that we're having fun. Sustainability can be fun. And I think that's the way we've tried to go about it over the last few years. Much to even when we personally might get down about, say, the state of things from an environmental point of view, I think it's really important that as a company image, you have to kind of have this positive mindset of, look, let's have fun with this. Let's make sustainability something fun, because then people are going to be more interested in giving it a go themselves. Well, I do always have this line: there are many shows that contain sets made out of plastic bottles or rubbish, and you know there's only so much of that you can fill a festival with before people just can get a little fatigued by that. And it's really important. It's often a young person's first experience of that conversation, and that's really, really important, but it's not the only side of it. Finally, I just want to, when you arrive at a venue, what do you expect as an organisation from a venue? What are the first things that you look out for in terms of environmental sensitivity? In terms of what they can give us as a company? Yeah. As a visiting company, I'd say, I mean, it's again, it's not to be too sort of nitty gritty, but is there tap water? If not, okay, it's bottled water. Have you got good recycling facilities? I think there's nothing worse than being at a festival where they'll come in, they'll give you a crate of these tiny little water bottles, and then there's no way to even recycle them. Oh, just put them in the box, we'll get rid of them later. It's kind of a bit like, oh, and we're kind of there going, we're the Handlebards, and we've cycled here, and that was all for a crate of bottled water. And that seems so silly, but it is something so small and simple. It's just about general sort of provision, and for the provision to be there for the company as much as for the audience. Make it easy for us, to be sustainable, nudge and prime us in the right directions. Don't make it hard for the audience or for us to do something easy, to sustainable. And the other thing I think is I don't need another tote bag, I think is what I'm going to say. I say this, we sell tote bags ourselves, but also we make sure it's sort of recycled or it's offcuts and things like that. It's always about it being a high quality sort of and recycled thing. But the amount of times I've gone to a festival and I've got a tote bag filled with this, that, the other, and I'm like, okay, great. I'm going to take that home, and that's
that's maybe going to get used once when I go to Asda. That's something to be careful about, I think, as a festival and as an organization, is that I have a friend who he works at Sheffield University, and he campaigned one year for them to not have, they were giving out Hessian bags to the students. And he was like, the student will have to use this Hessian bag over 1,000 times before the water that's been consumed by making it makes up for the fact if you'd have just given them a single-use plastic bag. So sometimes these virtue signaling green washing things can be quite dangerous and actually counterproductive. So really think about it. Do you need those tote bags? And is that necessary? Or is there something else?
Still going strong here, still going strong. There it is. It came with me to work today. It's been going for several years.
Well, that's great. So it's probably paid itself off already.
Yeah. I'm just going to reflect. The one thing about the water is really interesting, because when I was producing, absolutely, all artists need water there. We would put the crate out. Absolutely, we'd put the whole, the pallet. We had, this whole storage area for water bottles. And it was an artist who came up, and they were not aggressive about it at all. They just said, "Could we have a word? We really don't want to use these water bottles. Would it be at all possible you could find another way?" And my first thing was, oh God, here we go. And then actually it was the stewards who came in and said, well, we can do it this way. And if we manage that, and suddenly actually it was my team who came in and stopped my resistance as a producer. And then we removed it the following year. But it was actually that conversation with an artist that did it. And it was really nicely done. I just remember how well it was done. No, there was no kind of, we're not going to perform unless you, it was just, could you help us do this better? And that kind of dialogue was great. Tom, it's amazing what you do. You must be so fit as well. And I'm a big cycling fan, so I thoroughly approve. Chris, I'm going to move on to you, if I may. We will gather again. We'll obviously have some questions and any reflections on this. Chris, I wonder if you would like to talk to us a little bit about Shambala and how you run and how you embed your environmental sensitivity within your programming and work.
Sure. Well, thanks for inviting me along, and just to echo, how inspiring what you're doing is, Tom. It's quite unique and ahead of the game. So here I am in the Shambala HQ. It looks like a storeroom, I've realised now that I'm on Zoom. But as Angus pointed out, it's actually reusable bottles that we sell at the festival. So my background is festivals, obviously. I have a quick presentation. Basically some eye candy. So I'm not sure what everyone in the room does. This is very events focused, but I think there'll probably be something in there for everyone, even if it's not directly kind of relevant to everyone's day-to-day. Slideshow, play from start. Okay, so I'm just putting up front that this is sort of a ramble, really. My background is Shambala Festival. Co-founded it with a group of friends 20 years ago. In the beginning, to be honest, it was just a knees up. I think somewhere along the way we had families and started to really take environmental sustainability seriously. And now it's very much in the DNA and purpose of our organisation. I'll talk a bit more about that in a moment. As Tom mentioned, Shambala and myself have also been involved at industry level in the festival industry with various initiatives. One of them is a charity called Ecolibrium, which was set up in response to COP21 in 2015. We were thinking as an industry, kind of, what are we actually doing? Have we got a roadmap? And the elephant in the room, of course, in terms of the environmental impacts of our industry is travel. So we got together with a bunch of other festivals actually and co-founded a charity whose purpose is to support events and people in the music industry to reduce travel impacts. I'm also the associate for festivals and events with Julie's Bicycle. Some of you will know Julie's Bicycle, perhaps all of you do, but they're a fantastic charity with 15-year track record of supporting the arts sector in environmental sustainability, and they've got an amazing set of free-to-access tools. And any of you who are NPOs will already be using their Creative Green tools to report on environmental impacts. Another project which has emerged along the way is Powerful Thinking. I won't talk much about it, but any of you who happen to be interested in sustainable power at temporary outdoor events, Powerful Thinking is a wealth of free-to-access knowledge and resources and tools and case studies. This is the Show Must Go On report. So I think anyone in the art sector, really, certainly anyone in the event sector should read this. This was the report that we did as Vision 2025, which is the outdoor events industry's environmental steering group. So effectively, it's a kind of umbrella organisation of all the industry's trade associations sitting around the table talking about environmental sustainability strategy for industry. Again, as a response to COP21 in 2015, we wrote what was the first report, really, in terms of what are the impacts of our industry and where are we going. This is the second edition, and I think it's really worth a read. You know, set aside an hour and have a cup of coffee because there's quite a bit in there. And just very briefly, again, I won't talk much about this project, but just to put it on your radar in case it's relevant to you or any of your stakeholders or partners, the Vision 2025 is both a steering group for the industry and an active campaign which supports festivals to reduce environmental impacts. And our kind of mission really is to inspire a 50% reduction in the environmental impacts of the event sector by 2025. There's loads of information on the website. There's a resources hub, which I think is relevant to probably most arts organisations, with I think hundreds, certainly over 100 key resources around environmental action for events. So take a look at that if it feels relevant. So what are we talking about? Well, I don't want to teach everyone to suck eggs. It just this slide just happens to be in the presentation. And also it's an excuse for me to share with this, because I just found this so inspiring. It's just so simple and direct. You know, it's warming, it's us, we're sure, it's bad, we can fix it. So for me, all the kind of, you know, we could probably spend a week together on the psychology of people's engagement in, you know, climate crisis and fear and guilt and overwhelm. But I just like the way this frames the challenge personally. And you may have seen this because I often see this pop up in people's presentations. It just sort of feels wonderful to me. You know, what if it's all a big hoax and we create a better world for nothing? So, yeah. This is another sort of random-ish recommendation I just put in all my presentations. You may have come across it, but the Story of Stuff project. If you don't know this, just go and watch it, because there's a wealth of videos which communicate so well the kind of predicament we're in and tackle the sort of complex roots of some of our environmental problems so well. You know, from children to anyone on our staff teams. And this one, particularly the Story of Stuff, relates to materials. Angus gave me a few sort of prompts in terms of things to consider. And one of them was, how do we approach environmental management or managing our impacts as organizations? So I always use a hierarchy approach. And some or all of you may be doing this already. But of course, mission and vision is at the top of the pyramid in terms of, you know, why do we exist? What are we doing? What world are we trying to create? And then underneath that, an environmental statement or policy. So that's kind of, you know, a broad statement of where you position yourself and what it is that you're trying to achieve in terms of the environment. Underneath that, and a remarkable amount of organizations don't have this. I do a lot of consultancy work, and a lot of it is putting these policies in place for people. But a procurement policy. So it doesn't have to be kind of a complex or long document, but just a simple one-pager even that outlines for everyone in your organization and your stakeholders, you know, depending on your sort of level of influence on suppliers. You know, we really push this down the chain in terms of this is what we expect. You know, because of the way contracts work, we can't make our procurement policy mandatory for other companies, of course, but we can certainly influence decisions and share expectations. And basically, procurement policy governs all of our purchasing. I won't go into it in more detail than that, but it governs who we work with, as well as the physical materials that we buy. Underneath procurement policy sits an action plan for every event or project. So we have an action plan, the Green Action Plan 2022 for Shambala. We get the team together at the beginning of the year. You know, what went well last year, what didn't? What are we going to do this year? What are our targets and who's responsible? So, yeah, basic stuff. And then, of course, there's a whole world of policy and action plans that you may or may not want to have in place, which are specific to your business or activity. For instance, we have sustainable waste management plan, an energy management plan. You know, it goes on and on. I've probably got a suite of 20 sort of plans going on. But okay, so areas of impact, obviously, we're looking at materials, use and disposal. We're looking at our energy use, travel and transport, which is arguably the big one in terms of all of our carbon scopes, food and water. And I'm just going to briefly share a few of the things we've done. Oh, this slide should have been before that slide, but we've actually just been through a process of looking at our vision and mission, and so it feels very fresh and current. I just wanted to share it because, well, I'm excited. But our vision is to shift minds, touch hearts, and stir souls. It's very different from the last one. It's very kind of like, you know, why do we exist? And our mission is to cultivate the ecology of radical events. We've talked a lot about radical, but I think the challenge of our time calls us to be radical. Actually, and that's where we ended up with, you know, after a lot of conversation about how do we, you know, frame what it is that we do in so few words. And then regenerative. Of course, there's always a fashion in terms of the words that are associated with environmental action, but I think regenerative is here to stay and frames quite well what it is that we need to do. I think it's sort of replacing sustainability really as a kind of a North Star of a concept. Right, slides. Okay, what is waste? You guys don't need to do this. It's a hangover from another presentation really, but there you go. Waste hierarchy. I'm sure you all know this, but we all need to know this. Prevention, preparing for reuse, recycling, other recovery, disposal. There's a lot of interesting conversations down in the bottom there when you look at things through a circular economy. You know, really we should be aiming for reuse in all circumstances, and recycling should be a kind of last resort. And we should hopefully, you know, be moving away from waste to energy. Waste to energy has kind of been touted for the last 10 years as this wonderful solution because you get some energy from it, but it's not really better than landfill when you look at it in terms of life cycle analysis. So circular economy is where we're headed, and what I believe should be framing all of our approaches to policy in our organizations and approach. Excuse me. A few things we do at Shambala, so avoid and reduce. So we design out waste in the first place. Obvious stuff really. It's starting to happen in earnest across the festival sector now with reusable bar cups. You may have noticed that Glastonbury made another move towards designing out waste and banned the sale of drinks in reusable plastic bottles across site. I actually went behind the scenes with the waste manager over the weekend to ask him how it was going, and it made a marked difference in terms of the amount of waste on the floor. It's very difficult for them, of course, to go disposables free at that scale, but they are taking the steps that they can take. And encouraging reuse, of course. I'll talk a bit about a couple of our initiatives. And then recycling as much as possible. You know, what's the bin infrastructure? How are you separating materials? And so when we look at this strategically, you know, and this applies to any organization doing anything, which this just happens to be an event, of course, you know, where's the waste coming from? You know, for us, it's campsites, that's the audience, it's production and creative projects. We just produced last month a guide to sustainable creative production to push out amongst our creative community. It's the first time we've done that before. We've just had a few bullet points as a guide, but of course, producing something which looks nice and has some pretty pictures is always more effective. Staff and crew campsites, got a level of control over that. Offices, when an office gets delivered to site, the first thing we do before we even put furniture in is the sustainability team whip in there and put some recycling bins in. You know, it sets the tone. And like you were saying, Tom, you know, setting that tone at the beginning, either in a conversation by having the environmental sustainability as a standing agenda item at the beginning, or, you know, having a briefing as soon as people arrive, whether they're, I don't know, a volunteer for the night or a member of site crew on a festival site, really helps. We do a lot, and I'm not going to talk much about this because this needs to be brief, but we do a huge amount around food standards with our cafes. And of course, we work with bars. They're an important stakeholder in terms of waste, and also stock lines. You know, we only work with the most sustainable breweries. Sometimes it does cost more, but hey ho. This is one of my favourite initiatives, which I just wanted to share with you. So when we banned the sale of drinks, water in disposable packaging, we wanted to do something kind of fun with it. And again, echoing what you were saying, Tom, about kind of just making an effort to make it fun and engaging, has been really important in our journey in terms of engaging our audience, as well as being honest in our conversations about, you know, what we've got right, what we haven't, and what we need of our audience, and that they're very much a stakeholder in this. But this was a great initiative. We sort of found an artist working at Falmouth University who had done a project collecting plastic waste from the beach that he walked his dog on each morning. And over the space of 3 months, he collected enough waste. He then created the alphabet that you see at the bottom there out of the waste, which he turned into a type font, which you can download. And there's also a film that he made about it. So we launched our first reusable bottle with a partner Royal Company and with Frank Water, using this typeface, telling the story, giving some sort of, providing a story around the initiative, and also working with Frank Water on site, who were able to provide sort of chilled filtered water. So that's another concept which has been really important to us at Shambala, is that quite often it could be the case, is the case, or is perceived to be the case that when you make a change towards an environmental option, that somehow you are compromising someone's choice, quality, etc. So we've worked really hard to make sure that whatever change we're making, whether it's something in the office with our small staff team or something at the festival, that what we present is something which is a better experience. You know, sometimes that takes a lot of effort. And in this case, the better experience was that people had a clean festival site. It does make a remarkable difference. And that they had access across the site at the bars and through our partner Frank Water at stalls to chilled, filtered water, you know, a better experience. Reusable cups, they're becoming fairly normal at festivals now. People do report that they prefer the experience of using them. Yeah, for us at our scale, it works financially. It doesn't work for everyone. Yeah, but bring a cup, we produce our own cups. I'm going to race through it now because I'm probably... Angus, how much time have I got?
Oh, do have a little race through it, but we're
Okay.
good. We're good. Sarah will have her time too.
Yeah, so we produce our own cups, and so I mean it's a win-win really. You know, we have now banned completely disposable hot cups across the site. We actually phased that out over 3 years. So we didn't want to risk doing that too quickly because everyone's got to earn their living, and we felt that if we'd have done that kind of in one go, that there was a potential risk for all the coffee traders on site. So what we did with that one is introduce a cup, made it really sexy, made a fuss about it the first year. The second year we put a levy, a tax effectively, on disposable cups. We charged 50p for them. So, you know, the idea was that it would sting and people would notice. And the third year, which is this year, although we've had a hiatus of a couple of years like many of us, there are no disposable cups on site. This is just an example, another example of how we try and make things fun and engage people rather than just tell them what we think they should be doing. So this is part of the engagement team for the campsites. When we did an analysis of our waste, we realized that one of the key problems in the campsites was that organic waste, i.e. food waste, was contaminating what could be recycled in a secondary sorting process. So the priority for us was to support our camping public to separate their food waste so that we could recycle the dry mixed materials. So we have hundreds and hundreds of caddies, which we basically distribute through our campsite hubs to the festival goers. So it's a choice whether they use it. Most people do because we make it easy for them. And then we also send characters out. We did a bit of work on, how can we best communicate with our audience, keeping their campsite tidy, because especially the younger demographic who are not going to want to do this. They're really not interested in a steward in a high vis coming around to tell them to keep their campsite tidy when they're trying to have the time of their lives. But who's gonna be kind of bothered if it's your gran? So we made a whole team of grannies who came around and fussed and loved you and fussed over you, and told you to do your recycling. And it actually works. This is another initiative, which is our recycling exchange. So this is an example of carrot and stick. So I'm very fond of the polluter pays principle. Now, I don't think if you go to a festival or go to an event, you should be paying for someone else who isn't conscientious and won't bother doing their recycling. So what we did is we basically tax all the ticket buyers 10 quid when they buy their ticket. And when they attend the festival, they get a thorough briefing on entry. So no one can't know about this, as well as information in advance. They get a recycling bag and a waste bag. Now, there are three options. You bring your waste back to recycling exchange, you recycle it yourself, and you either get your tenner back or you get a merch pack worth 25 quid. So that's the incentive, and there is merch in there that you could only get through this scheme, heightening that incentive. Now, after a low take up in the first year, which shocked me, we were looking at how do we improve engagement. And we realized that people want to do the right thing. They want to keep their waste separate. They want to bring it back to us. They don't want to get their hands dirty. So we introduced a halfway house. We'll give you a £5 back and we'll use the other £5 to do the secondary sorting for you. The third option is you don't bother. We keep the tenner and that pays for the recycling. So that's just a kind of example of how, using incentives and carrots and sticks. We also try and make it fun. So there's the sort of jazz musicians entertaining people who don't look that happy about recycling their own waste. Okay, very quickly, energy. So some stats from the Show Must Go On report. Energy is usually at least a third of the on-site impact in terms of emissions of an outdoor event. 380 million litres of diesel are consumed at UK events every year, so it's a big deal. We know from research that a typical outdoor event can reduce fuel by 40%. And of course, with fuel prices rising, this is becoming, there's a lot more interest in this. I'm not going to do this. This is all the reasons why power, well, maybe I'll just have a quick, oh no, if you don't, I'll do this bit. Look, if you remember nothing else, which you won't because you didn't see the slides for long enough, establish what power you really need, use the power hierarchy to plan. That's in the Show Must Go On report, and collect power usage for future reference. So I mean, some of you who have already worked with Julie's bicycle realize that huge progress has also been made in buildings with both cost savings and emission savings. That's the average breakdown of a festival's emissions. That's scope 1, 2, and 3. So that includes audience travel, contractor travel, artist travel. Looks very different with on-site emissions, but it's quite useful. Another thing we did is we went meat and fish free. I'll race through this. We're quite sensitive about this because challenging people's diet is quite a risky business emotionally. But we definitely presented this as a debate. And again, going back to that principle of how can we provide someone with a better experience because of the changes that we're making to reduce impacts. We went hell for leather to make sure that we had the most delicious, healthy and good value menu that we've ever had. We also had some fun with it. So we actually, we brought together a lawyer, a real barrister, and environmental activists and farmers, and conducted a trial of Daisy the cow, AAK meat in our diet. It was inspired by Polly Higgins' Ecocide, sadly no longer with us. How did it work out? Amazingly, 50% of people who identified as meat eaters pre-festival reported post-festival they'd changed their diet drastically. Subsequently, 80% of our audience voted to stay meat and fish free. We gave them the decision, and now it's more like 93%. So just to sort of wrap it up in terms of kind of communications, really, this is what we've learned along the way. It's just keep it positive, be participatory, be evidence-based, take the time to know what you're doing. I can't recommend enough the music EQ course. You might want to make a note of that if it's new to you, which is a specific music industry climate literacy course. It's 79 quid, only takes a day. It's relevant for all the creative industries, and to take your whole organization through that gives you a basic level of carbon literacy, and it really enables conversations. Behavior psychology, understand your crowd. You probably do. We use the EAST model in terms of how do we communicate successfully, whoever our stakeholders in terms of the change that we want to put in place. And EAST, I hope I can remember this, is easy, accessible, sexy, and timely. So we look at the whole user journey, particularly around the audience. in terms of what to communicate when. And of course, reviewing and improving is a constant process. So overall, our experience, CAM modeling, different ways of doing things and presenting inspiring ideas really influence people beyond the moment. Yes, and we really learned that with the stats from the meat and fish free. Governance, set ambitious goals, systems approach, measure, review, and go again. You're probably all doing that already. This slide is in there because it's just a fantastic example of very clear communications. And my good friend Ed Gillespie, who's a communications sort of guru in my estimation, he always says, look, stories that work have to be clear and instinctive for all and worth repeating. And I always remember the dinner party test. You know, is a fact or something that you're sharing with someone so inspiring that they're going to tell someone at a dinner party next week? So working with artists, which is what you actually asked me to talk about, Angus. Excuse me, last two slides. This is essentially what we do in a nutshell with artists. We aim to inspire them to travel sustainably and offset unavoidable emissions through our partner project Ecolibrium. So we provide them with information in advance about that. It's tricky because, you know, whether the band gets the information, you've got agents, managers, etc. So it is a challenge, that arena. We provide green riders and we tell them, you know, that we're doing that. We provide reusable bottles on stages if they haven't brought their own. Provide information in dressing rooms about what we're doing, and we encourage them to speak out on climate. So that's in a nutshell. And programming wise, you know, we have content across the event. We have a specific venue, which is our mouthpiece for Rebellion. We have a specific talk, which is kind of, I guess, our keynote talk. This year it's Jojo from Ecoside. Previously it was Gail, one of the co-founders of XR. It talks and workshops throughout. And generally through our programming, we bring our programmers groups together and we do training days and try and inspire them around and give them targets around accessibility, diversity, gender equality, and environment. So this is my final note. I love this artist's work. It can sometimes feel overwhelming, the challenges we face, but I like the idea of relentless optimism. And this is my favorite quote at the moment, which is from Martin Luther, who's the German philosopher, not Martin Luther King. But even if I knew that tomorrow the world would go to pieces, I would still plant my apple tree. And I think for me, that captures a sense of, you know, however pointless or hopeless it may occasionally feel, you know, we have that choice fundamentally to stand in the world in the right way. Thanks.
Amazing, Chris. My God, there was a lot in there. I think David and I will go through the recording and try and pull out a lot of those excellent resources you've talked about there. I think just a couple of quick responses is, I love that you have got creative artist responses within all of that, which is great, seeing how you're using artist and creativity to enhance that. One of the big things I put photos of Extinction Rebellion was the wonderful repurposing of existing outdoor work in order to illustrate the point far better than a lecture. The travel is really interesting to us because a lot of our findings is that a lot of the outdoor arts work is about local audiences. So actually, if you're taking the work by bicycle or by van, you are actually reducing the impact of audiences by the fact that a lot of our work requires people to come very short distances, often on foot. So that's an interesting difference for us there. And a big thing about just doing it, I think one lesson I learned when we were doing the last conference pre-COVID was we were starting to set up, you know, oh, let's do the environmental panel and who's going to talk. And actually, it was one of my board members from Just So Festival who said to me, don't do the panel, just do the stuff, just do it. And actually, we then sat down with the same group. We've met, right, no lanyards, reusable coffee cups that people can take away and then they can get one for life, and we'll spend the money on that. And actually and those are the things people seem to remember much more than if we had had another panel talking about it and doing all, you know, with all due respect, showing all the slides with all the stats. It was kind of actually people remembered that they got a coffee cup and they didn't get a lanyard. That was the big talking point. So that was quite an interesting one. I think,
and of course, from a commercial perspective, there's a wonderful synergy between reuse and lasting merch with your branding that stays in people's everyday lives.
Indeed. This is good. It does carry on. I've still got that bag. Brilliant. Thank you, Chris. Sarah, we've left you no time, but Sarah, I'm just going to bring you in if you wouldn't mind. And what we'll do, we've got 10 minutes and then we'll sort of officially end because people have busy lives and we don't want to do too much Zoom. And if there's anything to follow up, you could drop us emails and things and we can share it, but we will kind of grab some resources. Sarah, talk to us about Highly Sprung. Talk to us about your work. Talk to us about what you do in terms of your content as much as in terms of how you deliver that. That would be great, Sarah. Thank you.
I think a really good jumping off place is to kind of pick up from where Chris left off, because one of the things that we do is tell stories. And, you know, you're absolutely right. People will remember a story for longer. So Highly Sprung, we're a physical performance company. We're based in the Midlands, and we were making outdoor work since sort of the beginning of our foundation. But mainly our drive was because we wanted to make work for people where there were no barriers, and where people could access culture without having to buy a ticket or feel the stigma of going to the theatre. So that's kind of where we started. And it was in 2014 that we decided to make our piece that I think we're most well known for, which is Urban Astronaut. And we wanted to make a piece which was for anybody, which was for streets, shopping centres, parks, you know, city centres, agricultural areas. We wanted to make a piece that would stop people in their tracks and ask them to start thinking differently about the possible environmental future that we were headed for. So Urban Astronaut takes place using a mobile aerial rig, because we wanted to create a sense of spectacle that would make people want to stop and watch, and hopefully then they would engage more in the message. But more importantly, I think the pieces of work that we make are all about telling stories of futures not yet experienced. And I know both of you have spoken about keeping it light and keeping it friendly and keeping it fun. I probably would say our pieces probably aren't a laugh a minute, because they probably ask you to imagine a future that none of us want to really end up in. But hopefully what they do is draw audiences' attention to particular environmental problems that they might not have considered in a way that feels personal to them. So Urban Astronaut is very much about air pollution, and we started off thinking about a lot of the research around air pollution and air quality in the places that we live, and how quickly and rapidly it was starting to decline. So the story of Urban Astronaut was really bringing to people's minds the danger of declining air quality and the impact that we were seeing globally on how it was contributing to an increase in kind of declining lifespans connected to air quality. So that was something. And I think with our work, we don't set out to provide answers. We don't set out to show people, if you do this, or if you change this, or if you do this differently, that's going to be the answer. We don't know the answers, but we feel that we are creating work to start mindfulness and to start debate, and just to bring some of those concerning issues to the foreground. And I think Urban Astronaut must be doing that. It's been touring. We're in our 8th year of touring that piece now. And one of the most incredible impacts of that piece is the relationship that we develop with our audiences after the show has finished, where people want to come and talk to us more, or have said that this hasn't been something I've thought about, or what can I do? Where are the resources I can go to? So we can kind of signpost, and we can invite people to continue that discussion. But I think it is about provocation. And we've done the same again with our new piece, Castaway, which only started touring last year. And Castaway is about starting conversations around what we dispose of, thinking about fast fashion, thinking about single-use plastics, thinking more about the attitude. I think we were trying to challenge an attitude that people have where they don't think about their personal responsibility for waste and for consuming. So we do that again in quite a brash, overly stylized way, with 2 characters who represent society's kind of consumerism and have no accountability or responsibility for the damage that they're doing to their surrounding. And then we again use spectacle and have a huge aerial rig. And we invented a character, a fictional spiritual being who kind of is connected to the environment and to the earth, who rises up out of the, I'm sorry, Angus, but it is a huge big dress made from, you know, discarded waste and plastic. We're one of those shows. And out she comes, and
there's too many of them is my issue.
I'm really sorry. I think we had that conversation when we were making it, and I was like, it's going to look great, and it does. And it uses up a lot of waste, which is really nice. Yeah, so that again, that piece is about kind of stimulating conversation and engaging people. I think a lot of our work is about engaging families and engaging young people. And I suppose people might say that we use shock tactics, which I'm not going to shy away from saying that I think we probably do. But again, it's because one of the most important things that we think we need to do in terms of environmentalism is make sure that people feel they have a voice, and to make sure that people feel that they are being heard. Because for us, we want to turn up the volume on some of these environmental issues and give people platform, give people space to have those conversations, and to start those conversations that might lead to change, and that might lead to innovation, and might lead to difference being made, either hyperlocally, locally, nationally, internationally. I'm not saying we're going to change the world, but I'm just saying I want to be part of a process that kind of starts people talking about the change that needs to be made. I think we're very conscious of the fact that we're working in an industry which is not built around sustainability. One of the things that we feel really inspired by in the outdoor arts sector is that when we build stuff, when we make sets, we do it for longevity. So in sort of mainstream commercial theatre, you might see very short-term resources going into building sets that then get wasted immediately afterwards. Whereas I think when we build something, we think about its life over a long period of time. So Astronaut, as an example, has had to last 8 years. So I think embedding into our DNA and our conscious, naturally, that kind of reuse, recycle, reduce is already there, because we're already thinking about what is the lifetime of this piece of work and how are we going to make it sustainable across that time, to help sort of our own resources, but also to make it more environmentally friendly as well. So I just thought I would just leave you thinking about how we go about the design part, because I think that's probably the part of the performance where we're most likely to have a negative environmental impact. So because we're making pieces which are all about environmental issues, it's very important to us that we have an environmental and ecological approach to making that work as well. So we use a circular design thinking mind frame, which I think you've kind of touched upon, this kind of circular ecology, and just take ourselves through some really simple questions. So when we first start thinking about if we need to buy something, if we need to make something, if we need to source something, the first question is, do we really need it? Or is there something that we already have or can borrow or can find that can be repurposed or reused in a different way? And if then we decide actually it is something we do need to buy, we need to understand its starting points. We'll always ask, where is it coming from? How is it being produced? And what are the impacts potentially of that starting point of that thing? And then how does it get to us? Where is it coming from? Is it something that could actually be collected locally, or do we have to rely on a delivery? Is it coming nationally or internationally? So all those things are part of our consideration before we've even made a decision about what that is going to be. And then once we have something, how are we using it? Because I think it's really important for you to think about the possible harmful side effects of using a particular material. So if we go back to the big rubbish dress in Castaway, we know that we're taking an enormous amount of plastic rubbish out into the street. And it's really, really important for us that none of that then filters out into the local environment. It's really, we have to maintain that so that it is safe. We have to, if anything does come off it, we have like our eyes on it so that we're collecting our rubbish. I think at one festival a part of it flew into a lake, and that was like the most awful thing that could possibly happen. But luckily there was someone in a pedalo and we were able to get them to collect it for us. So that is a big consideration. But it also might be that some of the processes that you're using might have harmful and toxic side effects. So thinking about the materials, fabrics that you're using, thinking about the washing that you're doing, what are you using, paints, etc., all of those things. And then if there does come a time where it's afterwards, can it be dismantled? Can it be responsibly recycled, where you're taking all parts apart again? So then you're starting to think about, at the building stage, how are you fixing things so that actually it can come apart again and either be reused, repurposed, or recycled in a way that is going to contribute better to the environment. And I think, Angus, you asked me to think about what we sort of require from festivals, and I think we've covered a lot of it. So absolutely refillable water stations, minimizing travel. So one of the things that we experienced at a festival recently, which was great, was a shuttle run from the train station, so that artists were able to group together and have one mode of transport from a train station to the festival site rather than independently coming. So that was really good. We all try to use a crew van, so we all do a single collection point from a train station and then all travel together. One of the things that I think is a consideration that I think a lot of festivals don't always think about is the location of the dressing room to where you're actually performing. Because if that is a big space, if sometimes we're looking half a mile plus, what will happen then is that we probably won't use that dressing space, which means any provision that you've put in place in that space, like water, like food, is probably not going to be able to be accessible because we don't have time to get to the dressing room and get back, or we've got so much stuff to carry with our boxes of costume, etc., that it just becomes really difficult. So I think that's a really important consideration. And I think food is one of my big considerations. Food production, food waste. One of the things that I think is really successful in festivals, and I think it would be lovely to think of festivals thinking more, is when we get to do shared meals. So when artists who are at festivals can come together and share a meal that we know has been sustainably produced and that the waste will be responsibly dealt with, that is always really great. And if that isn't possible, maybe making recommendations about local food spaces that are a better, more considered place to go. The other thing that's absolutely lovely is when festivals work with their local communities and host artists rather than relying on hotels, and those hosts provide meals for the artists. That is just feels so amazing. And when you're performing in a community that you've stayed with, the kind of the bond and the communication between you is even better. And I'm going to advocate the picnic policy, which is something that we use in our rehearsal room, where we might encounter spaces that aren't set up to dispose of rubbish responsibly and have recycling stations or recycling that is kind of intelligent enough to make a difference. We do the picnic policy, which is, you know, that lovely phrase that we all had in the countryside: take only memories, leave only footsteps. So take it home with you. We encourage people, whatever waste you bring into rehearsal, take it home and then make sure that you're disposing of it responsibly in a way that you have more control over in your own home. So there we go.
Brilliant. Thank you, Sarah. I think actually the thing you haven't quite mentioned is that you work so much with young people. And I think the context of what you're doing there in terms of communicating it to young people is absolutely key to why you do it and how you do it is that. And I very much see that in your work. It's about making sure that they have a voice as well as they have information, which I think is absolutely key. So I've got some vision now where you're sort of you're performing at a lake in Shambala Festival, and a bit of your costume goes in and a handlebar gets on a pedalo and cycles to save it. And we've got some kind of amazing illustration of the future of sustainable festivals. Guys, thank you all so much. You've given so many. I'm not going to ask you for your top tips. You've given us your top tips in spades. So thank you so much. We will gather together some resources, and thank you all for your time. And thank you for your really wise words. And I think actually the other thing, Sarah, I'm just going to finish with you is your work. Yes, it does go to dark places, but there's usually hope there. And I think
there's always hope.
There's always hope. And again, that's what Chris and Tom have also shown us, by demonstration. So thank you all very much. Let's go hopefully into this, with hope, into this next season. And thank you, and see you out there on bikes or pedalos or whatever. Cheers, guys. Thanks very much.